The night the city seemed to forget how to breathe began with rain slamming against broken pavement and neon lights bleeding into puddles like open wounds, and in the narrow alley behind a half-dead bar called the Rusty Anchor, a young barmaid named Emily Carter stepped out to dump trash, not knowing that the next few minutes would change her life forever, because beneath the stench of rot and alcohol she heard a sound that didn't belong there, a weak, trembling cry rising from a dented dumpster like a ghost begging not to be ignored, and before fear could talk her out of it, Emily moved closer and lifted the lid, only to freeze as her eyes met a tiny face smeared with dirt, rain, and blood, a little girl no older than 5 wrapped in a torn blanket, shivering and barely conscious, and in that moment the world narrowed to the sound of Emily's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Before the story pulls you deeper into what happens next, take a second right now to like this video. Share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. Emily had grown up learning how quickly life could discard people, raised in foster homes and cheap apartments, scraping by on tips and long nights, so when she saw the child in the dumpster, something old and fierce woke up inside her, a refusal to walk away even though every instinct screamed danger, because the little girl's jacket carried a symbol Emily recognized all too well from news headlines and whispered bar conversations, the unmistakable winged skull of the Hells Angels stitched on the back, and that symbol meant power, violence, and consequences, yet none of that mattered when the child whimpered and reached out with shaking fingers, clinging to Emily's sleeve as if she were the last solid thing in a collapsing world. Emily wrapped the girl in her own coat, ignoring the cold soaking through her clothes, and carried her inside the bar, past flickering lights and stale smoke, demanding help, but the manager backed away in fear and told her to call the cops and get the child out before trouble followed, and Emily understood exactly what he meant, because trouble was already written all over that patch, but instead of dialing the police, Emily made a different choice, one that would terrify her later when she fully understood the weight of it. She took the girl to the small storage room, cleaned her wounds with shaking hands, shared the only food she had, and listened as the child slowly fell asleep clutching Emily's wrist, breathing shallow but steady, and in the quiet moments Emily noticed a tiny name bracelet half hidden under grime, reading Lily Blackwood, and that name hit her like a warning bell, because everyone in the city knew Marcus Blackwood, a senior Hells Angels enforcer whose reputation filled rooms with silence and whose temper was said to be as legendary as his loyalty to family. As the night dragged on, Emily wrestled with fear, guilt, and a strange sense of responsibility, wondering who could throw a child away like trash, and knowing deep down that whoever did would be hunted without mercy, yet the greater fear was what would happen if Marcus Blackwood discovered that his daughter had been abandoned and that a poor barmaid was now the one holding her, because in this city, angels didn't ask questions twice. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Blackwood was tearing the city apart, his world collapsing in slow motion after discovering his daughter missing, his massive frame shaking with rage and panic as his brothers searched streets, hospitals, and shadows, because for all his brutality, Lily was the one soft place in his life, the last promise he'd made to his late wife, and as hours passed without answers, his fury turned inward, replaying every mistake, every deal, every enemy who might want to hurt him through his child. When word finally reached the club that a bartender near the docks had found a Hells Angels child alive, Marcus didn't hesitate, engines roaring as dozens of bikes cut through the rain, their headlights slicing the darkness like judgment, and by the time they surrounded the Rusty Anchor, the entire block felt like it was holding its breath, neighbors peeking through curtains, expecting bloodshed. Inside, Emily felt the vibration before she heard the engines, her hands trembling as she stood between Lily and the door, knowing she could run but choosing not to, because leaving would mean abandoning the child all over again, and when the door finally opened and Marcus Blackwood stepped in, the room seemed to shrink around him, his eyes scanning until they locked onto Lily, and in that instant something inside him shattered and reformed, the hardened biker dropping to his knees without a word, tears cutting through the grime on his face as Lily stirred and whispered his name, and the sight stunned everyone watching, because this was not the monster they expected but a broken father reunited with his child. What happened next shocked the city even more, because instead of turning his rage on Emily, Marcus listened as she explained how she found Lily, how she stayed when others told her to run, and how she protected her without asking for anything in return, and for a long moment silence hung heavy, until Marcus stood, removed his jacket, and draped it over Emily's shoulders, a gesture of protection few ever received, and declared in front of his brothers that Emily Carter was under his personal protection for life, that anyone who harmed her would answer to him, and that the person responsible for dumping Lily would be found and punished, not with chaos, but with certainty. In the days that followed, the truth came out, a bitter family betrayal fueled by drugs and jealousy, handled quietly but firmly, while Emily's life transformed in ways she never imagined, her debts cleared, her safety ensured, and her future suddenly filled with options instead of dead ends. Yet the greatest change wasn't money or protection, it was the bond that formed between Emily and Lily. A bond of survival and trust that no patch or power could erase, and even Marcus found himself changed, forced to confront the cost of the life he led and the miracle that reminded him what he still stood to lose. As weeks turned into months, Emily left the bar and began training as a social worker, inspired by one small life saved in an alley, while Marcus funded shelters and quietly ensured no child in his territory would ever be discarded again, proving that redemption sometimes enters the world through the most unexpected doors. Just before this story ends, tell us in the comments what you think real strength looks like and whether you believe one act of kindness can truly change a life, because your voice matters here. And now, as this story closes, if it touched your heart, if it made you feel hope, anger, or compassion, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and stay subscribed, because every engagement helps stories like this reach more people, and sometimes, hearing the right story at the right moment can be the difference between walking away and choosing to save someone left in the dark.